When Mafia 3 first launched, I was excited about a new entry in the series. While I didn't buy it immediately, I did pick it up a few months later, and I was extremely underwhelmed and disappointed. One of the major problems Mafia 3 initially encountered when hitting the market was that it simply wasn't finished. Due to the budget and time constraints placed on the team in Hangar 13, Mafia 3 was forced to release before it was ready to be. In my case, because I'd played the game a few months after release, where Hangar 13 had been able to deploy a number of helpful patches, I didn't actually run into a great many of the game's launch issues. Instead, where the game lost me at the time was with the game's central design philosophy of an open world checklist that replaced the previous entries' carefully crafted linear narratives. In my late 20s when this came out, I was a relatively impatient college student who didn't slow down to take the world as seriously it deserved to be. I didn't take the time to read between the lines and really take in the central themes and attention to detail that Mafia 3 had to offer. I lament this even more considering this world that Hangar 13 have so lovingly built is one that is, in part, an echo of my own lived experiences in ways I didn't fully realize at the time. I came back to Mafia 3 in part because of my affection for the series, and in part to see if an older, more thoughtful, better educated version of myself would find the time and energy to appreciate this project that was so clearly made with an abundance of respect for the history and culture of America, and a deep appreciation for many of the struggles that have long permeated American culture. I was sort of blindsided by just how much I'd come to enjoy this title, even more so considering how hard I'd bounced off it the first time I visited. As you watch this, I hope that I'm able to accurately convey just how impactful I found Mafia 3. I also hope that if you bounced off of it like I did, or have any interest in the Mafia series or portrayals of lives past in the form of historical depictions of American society, I hope you pick this up and experience it for yourself. Overall, I hope to convey just how much Mafia 3 is worth your time. If you're still here for it, please remember to like the video and subscribe for more, because even at the close of this review, we won't be done with Mafia 3. As always, let's start with monetization. On Steam, the PlayStation Network, and the Xbox Store, Mafia 3's definitive version retails at list for $30 or euros, and it regularly goes on sale for less than 10. Because this is the definitive edition of the game, it also includes all of the DLC released for Mafia 3, including story expansions, Faster Baby, Stones Unturned, and Sign of the Times. We'll cover those briefly in this review, but I will cover more of Mafia 3 in subsequent videos, just like we did for the first two Mafia games. If you do pick this up on PlayStation or Xbox, please note that while they are free, you may have to download all of the DLCs individually. On Steam, all of the DLC are included in the base download. The presentation of Mafia 3 is almost the best in the series, understandably falling short only of 2025's Mafia: The Old Country due to its age. The very first thing I noticed were the character models. Much like Mafia Definitive's remake, Mafia 3 characters were realized using scans of real actors, lending a much more realistic vision to the game over the first two. These scans are very high quality, and coupled with the motion capture and voice performances of the cast, the game conveys a sense of realism and humanity that the first didn't do quite as well. Mafia 3's graphics do have what I call a retro feel to them, as there seems to be a kind of washed out visual filter over the top of the game. I didn't dislike this, as I often do with other titles, because it reminded me of the old 1960s, 70s films, and that they didn't have the crystal clear HD fidelity that we so often enjoy today, so I didn't care to change that via mods or anything similar, in favor of trying to adhere to the sense of place Hangar 13 was trying to achieve. In my Mafia 2 review, I said that the art style was virtually timeless and praised how good the game looked well over a decade later. As Mafia 3 came out about 6 years after the previous entry, graphical improvements weren't just expected but demanded by the market, and I'm happy to report that Hangar 13 absolutely delivered on this front. Mafias 1 and 2 were much more about conveying a stylized version of their period pieces in fictionalized versions of Chicago, Illinois, and New York City, New York, respectively. Mafia 3 instead much more closely adheres to actual American history in its interpretation of New Orleans, Louisiana. The game also explores American racism, white supremacy, police brutality, poverty, drug addiction, social and economic inequality, and much more. Because of Mafia 3's choice to adhere much closer to realism and higher graphical fidelity, the game feels much more somber and more brutal in many ways in comparison to its predecessors. I felt this change was a fantastic decision in that this graphical style does a much better job of conveying the realities, struggles, and successes of the American and Southern societies in the late 1960s. Much like Mafia 2 and the Mafia remake, Mafia 3 also does a really fantastic job of populating the coastal subtropical city of New Bordeaux with well-realized and well-detailed neighborhoods in which to travel in. And the surrounding swampland, coast, bayou, and neighboring parish do a great job at providing visual and environmental variety. In addition, each of Mafia 3's dozen-ish districts within the city are varied and tell stories of their own regarding the conditions in which the residents live, with poorer black communities being realistically portrayed as run down and with fewer economic opportunities, fewer social amenities, and less investment overall in comparison to the wealthier, whiter neighborhoods within the city, something that continues in the real-life United States to this day. Mafia 3 also has an excellent soundscape to aid in its portrayal, which again, best in the series, automotive and firearm audio. Combat isn't quite as loud or as punchy as it could be due to what I think is a combination of consideration regarding environmental factors, or lack of consideration rather, like building materials, distances, and some admittedly weak audio mixing when it comes to explosions specifically.
It's a goddamn... Let's go! We got a skull to settle now. How can I have it?
And we'll be fine.
He's shooting the place down! Fuck you! That's worth a look. Holy balls!
Say goodbye.
No can do.
Heading for cover.
Mafia 3's gunshots are impactful, and along with the animations, wounds, blood effects, and more, they do a great job in presenting the gunfights present in the title.
Hands. Oh, hell. This thing. This way! Hell yeah! Run for cover! My time is up. I'm gonna take you with me. Circle around here. Hey, Dad.
There's no way to fast travel from one side of the map to another, and no system to go from point to point, etc., such as a taxi, subway, cart, or anything similar. Instead, you're expected to walk, run, or drive everywhere. At first, I found this mildly annoying, but as the game progressed, I couldn't imagine the game with a fast travel system for two reasons. The driving is very fun, and the music in this game is one of the best collections I've ever listened to. The Mafia 3 driving and handling systems aren't best-in-class simulation quality. This is much more of an arcade feel akin to games like Watch Dogs and Grand Theft Auto, but the driving is so damn fun, I didn't mind at all. I think this style was chosen to emphasize the glamour and thrill of driving a classic muscle or exotic car from this area, with vehicles directly inspired by classic American cars like the Chevy Camaro, Ford Mustang, Ford Torino, and more. These are paired with a pitch-perfect soundtrack played by the in-game radio, accurately drawing inspiration from one of the most impactful periods of American musicianship. Classics such as I Fought the Law, The House of the Rising Sun, Paint It Black, and more that I absolutely Cannot play here without YouTube demonetizing this video faster, baby, than I can publish it. Sincerely, one of my favorite parts of the game is just driving throughout the city with the radio on, and that's something I can say for very few games I've played. As I said, there's also an in-game radio that I'm going to draw on pretty heavily for the narrative video that will follow this one, and that's because in many ways, the radio is actually essential to a great many of the stories, both large and small, that transpire within Mafia 3's overall plot.
Hey, dear listener. It's been a heck of a few months, hasn't it? Are we done with 1968 yet? Welcome back to Native Son. You know, a quiet corner of South Downs became a little less so earlier this week. Seems a fracas broke out there. Maybe even a whole to-do. Colored couple was moving into one of them new duplexes coming out that way. But with all the violence going on in town, the folks who lived there had, they had objections. Now, way out here, words were exchanged. The police had to come out, and sometime after midnight on Monday, that poor colored family found a cross burning on their lawn. Next morning, the colored family moved out, presumably to a place over in the Harlem.
This was also the case in the first Mafia game. It's also a great world building tool that is almost perfect in how it portrays a town or city in the American South, and I say that as a lifelong American Southerner. Overall, Hangar 13 did a wonderful job in weaving together a myriad of mediums from art to music to vehicles, clothing, and prop design to accurately and stylishly give us a world with which to live in for the duration of our time with Lincoln Clay. For performance, I don't remember any crashes, major frame drops, or anything similar to disrupt my experience with Mafia 3. I did play this on a 2070 Super, and with a mouse and keyboard, something I've since stopped doing. There are probably some visual or audio glitches in this footage because I did encounter some, but they were so infrequent and unobtrusive, I don't feel the need to scour my footage to find and point them out. Overall, I had a great time with Mafia 3 and nothing performance-wise got in the way of that. Much like the first two games, Mafia 3 does feature a central narrative and a series of chapters that will culminate in a set ending. Unlike the first two games, these chapters aren't set in their order, allowing you to essentially pick your path throughout the story. Also, unlike its predecessors, this game requires you to earn those narrative chapters via open-world tasks that scattered throughout each city district. Mafia 3 features a rich world filled with layers of systems that make for a much more involved gameplay experience than the first two. This is a good thing, because Mafia 3 is larger and longer than each of those games combined. Lincoln Clay's objective throughout the game is to dismantle the ruling Marcano crime family's citywide criminal enterprise by disrupting and assuming control of each criminal racket throughout New Bordeaux, and then to claim those resources for its own. Lincoln does this primarily with the aid of his mentor in the CIA. Using his handler's government resources, Lincoln will collect fuses throughout the city in order to unlock junction boxes and wiretap the phone lines in an area. The benefits of doing this are immediate, as this allows Lincoln to see all points of interest, collectibles, and enemies of the district on the minimap, and allows him to see and track enemies through solid surfaces. It's a little overpowered, but it is useful vast majority of the time. While I was annoyed at this mechanic at first, I found that around halfway through the game that my vigilant collection of fuses meant I didn't have to collect any more throughout the rest of the game. A little less than half of the game's fuses are required to wiretap all of the game's junction boxes. Not only that, but I also found that I appreciated this mechanic because it took me into back streets, alleys, and neighborhoods I wouldn't otherwise visit. While this sounds tedious, I enjoyed it because it helped me to explore the world and really appreciate the time and effort put into the game that I otherwise wouldn't have. After the intro and first few chapters of the game, Lincoln creates his own criminal enterprise, the Clay crime family, and recruits up to 3 lieutenants, one of which is Mafia II protagonist Vito Scaletta, to lead the districts of the city he takes over after he passes control down to them. Each of the 3 potential lieutenants from the Haitian, Italian, and Irish mobs, respectively, have their own story arcs in their districts that expand further out into the city, giving us more insight into each of them and their relationships both with the city of New Bordeaux and with Lincoln. On the flip side, you don't have to pick to keep all 3 of the lieutenants. For example, if you give all territories to one lieutenant over and over, eventually one or both of the other 2 will become more and more pissed at Lincoln and eventually turn on him. resulting in a final mission with that underling in which you put them down and move back to the main task of tearing the city's underbelly apart. I didn't personally see these, I didn't care to, but they are options for players who do. If you and Lincoln do decide to recruit and retain all of them, however, as I did, the Clay crime family will meet in an abandoned mansion in the Bayou Fantôme adjacent to the city for a sit-down. The sit-down is one of the more impactful mechanics of the game, as here's where Lincoln will listen to each lieutenant's proposal, mostly in the form of mechanical upgrades, and then decide which to award the hard-earned district to. I was kind of annoyed that they didn't earn those districts themselves, but as the game progressed, I softened on this. From both gameplay and narrative perspectives, none of the lieutenants have the skills or influence that Lincoln does, and as the game progresses, it becomes more and more clear why only Lincoln is fully equipped to lead this gallery of rogues and, by extension, the city's criminal enterprises.
Out, just know, second you step out that door, your name's getting added to my list, right beneath Marcano's. Now, if we're all done acting like goddamn children, let's go over the plan.
This is one of the main features of Mafia III, and I felt it more compelling than any other in the series. I was interested to learn who these people were, how and why they became this way, and what they hope to achieve in their futures in this city. They're surprisingly complex individuals. While some other games may give you good or bad options of companions to recruit and interact with, each of Mafia 3's main companion characters hide a surprising depth to them. Meeting each of the three was tense for me, and at first I didn't like any of them, yes, including Vito. If you're interested, I explain why I don't like Vito in my Mafia 2 critique video. I'll leave that below. After some time and investment in them, however, I came to very much care about them and respect each of them in ways I hadn't expected. Clearing rackets, killing rivals, and building influence with each lieutenant isn't just for narrative progression. There's also mechanical benefits to investing in each. These result, for example, in new passives such as increased accuracy, health, and ammo, new equipment such as rifles, explosives, vehicles, and new abilities such as calling in hit squads, calling off police attention, or disrupting phone lines of locals trying to report your crimes. While some of these perks are more impactful than others, most of them introduce new gameplay opportunities that were not possible in the previous games of the series. And as these rackets are cleared, the vast majority of them are replaced with the Clay crime family's own illicit business venture, which is often a less harmful and more community-minded alternative to replace it. Another feature added to Mafia 3 is one of my absolute favorite additions to the series: viable and effective stealth gameplay. In each of the first games, stealth wasn't really an issue, due in part because of a lack of investment in those titles' gameplay systems. They simply weren't built for stealth to be a viable feature. For Mafia 3, however, stealthing through an entire building of mobsters is an entirely viable way to play the game. In addition to silenced firearms, Lincoln is quite accomplished in hand-to-hand combat from his time in Vietnam. And it allows him to ruthlessly stab, choke, slam, and otherwise brutalize his well-deserving victims.
Shit, I had him. I know you don't belong here. Grenade! Guess we put the fear of God in him. How'd it get by us? Okay then, where do you want to look?
I don't give two shits about it. I ain't giving up that easy.
I will not forget face, young man.
Ah! Get out of here! I can't die like this.
Please down here.
I can't die like this. We got a problem here. Somebody.
violence in Mafia 3 is much more pronounced than in the previous games, and this is something I really appreciated, as it pairs well with the more mature and emotional themes that Mafia 3 explores throughout. One of the most innovative and appreciated features of Mafia 3 is a racism mechanic. That's not a joke. In the late 1960s, one of the crimes that Lincoln Clay can be punished for is simply existing in space while being black. True to the time, there are stores, restaurants, bars, and more that have shopkeepers who will try to force Lincoln out, saying he's not welcome, even extending to call the police if he doesn't comply. Signs adorn walls and doorways in unsafe zones that say whites only. Civilians will often make derisive or just plain racist comments to Lincoln out on the street as he walks by. Police, when they see Lincoln, will focus on him with their full attention for no reason. He's suspected of wrongdoing even when simply walking around in the New Bordeaux sunshine as a decorated veteran of his country. While this sounds restrictive and annoying, what I found is that was a tremendous amount of opportunities to roleplay, to create my own interpretation of Lincoln in the moment-to-moment gameplay of the title at every step. If I walk by a police officer and he provokes me by being a racist asshole, do I ignore him and move on with my life because he has a badge and a gun and I'm a black man in the American bayou? Or do I beat him to a pulp in the street and run before officers arrive? If a woman in the city's well-to-do center says something hateful, do I just ignore her and walk away because she's a white woman? Or do I find my car and run her racist ass off the sidewalk? It doesn't stop there either. The game goes a step further and also includes the Mafia version of the Ku Klux Klan. The Southern Union are a whole gang-like faction of bagheads who can't see fucking shit out of them things. And they'll play a large part of Lincoln's campaign against the city, because these men hold influential positions within the city, both economic and political. After the intro, the opening chapter of the game introduces these simple farmers, these people of the land, common clay of New Bordeaux, as opposition for Lincoln as they taken over Delray Hollow, Lincoln's home and heart of the city's black community. Mafia 3 also simulates police response times district by district. For example, if Lincoln were to assault a black bartender near the coast, or fire a gun in the city's poorest, blackest district, the police aren't nearly likely to respond in a timely manner, if at all. Slap down a white record store owner or steal an exceedingly nice car in the city proper, however, and the police will be on Lincoln's ass like white on rice and a glass of milk on a paper plate in a snowstorm. More than any other feature in the game, these stand as testaments to the recognition of Hangar 13's cognizance and consideration of just how real this world could feel and how much racism affected the everyday lives of black people in 1960s America. As an aspect of the simulation, it's an innovation that I've never before seen in gaming or since, and it's a hell of an achievement here that I greatly wish were both more widely recognized in this title and used more often in the medium. Once enough open world tasks and a quota of destruction are fulfilled on each objective, Lincoln can progress to what would have been just another chapter in the previous games. And this one, once the help is recruited or put down, Lincoln can face off with a specific, well-written boss of the Marcano crime family. In each of these scenarios, the player is offered a unique, interesting, and often cinematic level, specifically and thoughtfully designed to stand apart from the rest of the game that often parallels the respective foe's racket. While there are aspects of Mafia 3's gameplay that remain less polished than others, I found Mafia 3 extremely fun and hard to put down once I got back into it. Despite how much I loved Mafia 3, there are some criticisms of the game compared to the first two that I cannot ignore. One well-loved feature of the first two games that is not here is a feeling of living within the world that I found a strange omission for games with so many otherwise parallel design decisions. In both Mafia 1 and 2, Tommy and Vito can unlock a variety of period-accurate vehicles. In Mafia 2's case, Vito can either buy them from car dealerships or choose to steal them from areas in the city and sell, customize, or store them at his home garage. In another example, Vito could also visit shops and buy new outfits and visit diners to buy food that would provide healing, while Lincoln does have access to new threads via his safe houses and healing via battlefield syringes always on his person. The inability to simply sit down at a diner for a morning cup of coffee or even just the bar at a nightclub in Delray Hollow for a beer and a performance, something slightly remedied via a DLC, really does detract from the immersion and the sense of community that Mafia 3 could have provided. As I said before, Mafia 3 is primarily a revenge story. The overall story is of Lincoln Clay, a young black veteran freshly home from his Black Ops unit in military service in Vietnam. Once back, he steps home into the city of New Bordeaux to help his adopted father with a job before leaving for California to find his own way in the world. Before he can leave, however, Lincoln's family is betrayed and murdered, leaving Lincoln badly wounded in the attempt. What follows is a months-long journey in which Lincoln tears ass throughout the city in order to bring his form of justice to those who've wronged him and his family. My favorite aspect of the story is how it's presented to us. In a style I've only seen once or twice in recent memory, Mafia III frames its events as a documentary that's presented to us well after the events of the game. Using this style, we get to see how many of the game's characters in the city of New Bordeaux are affected by Lincoln's coup and the choices of how districts are allocated to his lieutenants. I've only ever seen this style of narrative framing used in Far Cry 5 that I can remember, and unfortunately that was almost entirely in that game's marketing, and I'd love to see this presentation, documentary style, used more often in games. In addition to the main plot of the game, Mafia III Definitive includes 3 DLC expansions that serve to complement the main game: Faster Baby, Stones Unturned, and Sign of the Times. I'll go into these much more in our narrative video, but I found all 3 unique and enjoyable for different reasons. Faster Baby is a deep and surprisingly well thought out detour into the adjoining Sinclair Parish to combat the town's cold-blooded racist piece of shit of a sheriff, and features a foxy brown-like female counterpart for Lincoln and a myriad of Smokey and the Bandit-esque car chases to boot. While I guess it could be construed as a bit goofy, I found it more liberating and empowering, serving as a welcome complement alongside the DLC's more grave central narrative. In addition, Lincoln also saves and incorporates into his burgeoning criminal empire a marijuana farming operation, in which he can cultivate and sell different strains for various degrees of profit. I found this an interesting management addition to the game that I wish were more widespread in these kinds of crime simulations. Stones Unturned is an action-filled bromance, yeah, you heard that right, complete with an island raid that suggested to me what Vietnam jungle warfare could have looked like for Lincoln had Hangar 13 decided to show that part of his life. It features heavily armed mercenary types for Lincoln and his CIA counterpart to fight. I found this fun in the moment, but almost entirely forgettable, and I found it added almost nothing to the overall context or narrative of the base game. But I did enjoy it because, again, it was fun. Finally, Sign of the Times is a more out there DLC involving Lincoln trying to help a young woman evade the clutches of a white supremacist cult in a plot that mixes drug use, cult indoctrination, sexual violence, and an unexpected focus on the Southern supernatural. It also introduces for the first time in the Mafia games a light touch of investigative work that I hope continues in future games, much more similar to like LA Noire, for example. Finally, this DLC, the final release, also includes the option to renovate Sammy's Bar, the business owned by Lincoln's adoptive father, who was killed early in the game. This costs quite a lot of money to do, and I suspect it's to allow players something to spend their money on, and even though it goes against the canon of what Father James says about the bar in an early cutscene in the base game, I found this revision appropriate to Lincoln's journey and as a possible outcome for the city. Of the 3 DLCs, I found this one by far the most interesting. In most of my review videos, I don't like to spoil anything narrative related, but the story of Mafia 3 is so straightforward that I don't mind doing so, especially considering the marketing material used for the game spells it right out. This simplicity that veered away from the series' previous entries of unforeseen outcomes and endings was too much of a departure for some players, as many still call it boring and unfulfilling. I disagree. Much like Red Dead Redemption 2, knowing the endgame, knowing the goal that every step would take me closer to, made me savor and appreciate every moment I could with Lincoln Clay and his counterparts. I didn't come to Mafia 3 for the ending. I came for the ride. The chronicle of that ride, of my and Lincoln Clay's journey throughout this beautiful, broken city, is the subject of a later video. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel if you'd like to join us for the coup of New Bordeaux. In case I haven't made it abundantly clear by this point in the video, Mafia 3 is thus far my favorite title in the series. This entry is one that I thoroughly enjoyed from beginning to end and didn't want to leave. While I know there's significant design departures from the previous games in the series, once I started appreciating the world instead of just the main story in it, I grew to love it. And I didn't expect that, considering how apathetic I was in this world before. If you can get over the Ubisoftification of an open world that has consistently engaging combat, beautiful world design, and rich, well-written characters that are more human than most, I think you'll find a lot to love here. In the next video for Mafia 3, I'm going to try something a little bit different and straight up copy one of my favorite YouTubers, Noah Caldwell Gervais. So we'll see how that goes. After that, we will hopefully be the first entry of a new series I've long had on the drawing board. I hope to see you there. Hit me up in the comments so I can say hi. Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching my video.
Turn it off! Nothing else to say about any of this.